Friends and students here at SUU, welcome to Teaching and Learning at Southern Utah University, the podcast that delves into the dynamic world of education in one of the most vibrant academic communities. Join us as we explore innovative teaching methodologies, insightful discussions with educators, and inspiring stories of student growth. Whether you're a seasoned educator or a curious student or simply passionate about the art of learning, this podcast is your window into the enriching experiences that shape Southern Utah University's learning environment. Today, we are so lucky to have Marvin Dodge come back to Cedar City for a few minutes with us and take a few minutes. Marvin is now the Executive Director at the Utah Department of Government Operations. We're excited about his opportunities to help education statewide. And Marv, we've got a few questions for you, but first, could you tell us a little about yourself, a little about your background?
Yeah, well,
what brought you to academics?
Yeah, to academics. Well, thank you so much, and it's wonderful to be with you, and wonderful to be back on campus. I started my career back in 1994 after graduating from BYU, so sorry it wasn't SUU, but I got hired in the governor's office to begin auditing grant programs was really how I started out. And through a number of changes up there, ended up being deputy director of the governor's budget office for a number of years, and then was deputy director of the Department of Administrative Services before I decided it was time to jump out and jump into higher education. Scott Wyatt was the new president at Snow College back in 2008, 2007, and hired me to be the vice president for finance and administrative services. We worked together there for 6 or 7 years, went through the Great Recession of 2008, which was pretty rough, especially in a small town with 5,000 people. We affected a lot of lives, unfortunately, there as we went through all the legislative mandated budget cuts and so forth. And then landed here at SUU, was here 9 years in the same role, vice president of finance and admin services, and have many, many friends at SUU. Had a great experience while I was here. And in April of this year, Governor Cox reached out to me and asked if I would join his cabinet and head up this Department of Government Operations. So I still have my home in Cedar, but I have an apartment in the Salt Lake Valley and drive back and forth a couple weekends a month. So,
we are so glad that we were able to connect for a few minutes this morning. It was wonderful being able to connect with you again, and hopefully some of our learners will appreciate some of the perspectives that you'll be able to share. Over your tenure, both at Snow and in the governor's office, have you seen the field of education change? Have there been changes that you've seen or you've witnessed that you could talk to us about? Anything that, from your perspective, what are some of the major changes that you've seen occur?
Yeah, and it is fascinating. It's a little bit disheartening for me because when I started at Snow years ago, and it still is a wonderful 2-year school with a few bachelor's degrees, I think it felt more like the traditional college experience that our parents had talked about. Excuse me, and kids that were just, I shouldn't call them kids, but students that were just engaged. That Tony and I are sharing a laugh here, which is an indication of our own age, but really engaged in that process. And it's been fascinating and disappointing over the years, 16 years in higher education, for the increase in mental health challenges that students are facing and coming to school with, whether it's depression or anxiety. I know by the time I left here on somewhat of a regular basis, unfortunately, there were students who attempted suicide that were in our sites, very, very concerned about them. But this whole dynamic of shifting from in-class learning to online learning has made just a huge difference, and I think will continue to make a difference. I think there are a lot of folks that are questioning the value add, if you will, of a full college degree, either questioning why do I have to take all these general ed courses and why can't I just focus on my major? I think we're hearing a lot more of that. And so I think that model is changing. People want it faster and quicker and so forth. A bit of a change from what it was years ago when I went to college.
And you really highlighted that very, very well, that technology has an impact upon some of the things that, some of the instructional opportunities and approaches that we do engage in. Have you seen can you give an example or two of how technology has impacted you in your job, in your position over your career and tenure?
Yeah. Well, it's interesting because in my new role, one of the areas of responsibility I have is the Division of Technology Services. So for the entire state of Utah, all things technology, we're seeing a drastic increase in what's become a cottage industry. It's beyond a cottage industry for ID theft, ransomware attacks. I mean, we're working on a number of initiatives at the state level for ransomware attacks, and there are countries out there that have set this up as an industry. When you get notice that your data has been encrypted and you no longer have access to it, you call in a call center and you talk with a very nice helper who explains what's happened and how you can pay this fee with cryptocurrency and how to set up a cryptocurrency account. I mean, it's just billions of dollars are being lost. And so there's a hypersensitivity and focus on how do we protect data, how do we protect those networks. And it's interesting timing as we move into so much online learning. One of the most profound experiences I had, I was actually teaching a budget and finance class when COVID hit and when we had to tell students over spring break, please don't come back. We're going to move everything to remote learning, which was fascinating in and of itself as we all scrambled to set up Zoom accounts and be prepared. I will never forget, I had one student in that class, and it was a night class. If you can believe it, 2.5 hours. It met on Tuesday nights. It was pretty brutal for the subject matter, not because I was wonderful, but I had this one student who asked me, can you hang on after the class is over? I'd like to talk to you for a few minutes. And I said, you bet. And she was a military vet who really had struggled with PTSD. And she said, I just want to thank you for continuing to teach this class, even though it's remote, because this is the only interaction I have outside of my apartment with the outside world. And as a vet, struggling with PTSD, it's been incredibly, incredibly difficult. And that put that whole concept of online learning in a whole different world for me. So it's fascinating. And of course, our online enrollments are growing. They've grown remarkably here at SU, and there's a whole bunch of financial implications for that as well.
Exciting times and a lot of times for innovation as well, too. I've been particularly impressed, Marv, with your administrative leadership. Can you talk to us for a moment or two about observations that you've made in academics or in university life in regards to administrative changes? Do you see, what have you seen recently and what do you see to the future as far as support that administrators can give to faculty and students to be able to make learning important and critical and meaningful for them?
Yeah, there's a number of things here, and this was an interesting ongoing conversation with President Wyatt when he was here, and for the whole cabinet as we worked together. That years and years and years ago, college was a collection of faculty and students, right? Faculty provide the advising and career, help people get jobs, and all of those things was pretty tight-knit. And a small budget for the most part because you're generally covering teacher salaries, faculty salaries. And it's interesting because over time, with funded or unfunded mandates from government in general, and a lot that came down from the federal government, higher education has to become all things to everybody who attends, right? This has had the most dramatic financial impact on colleges and universities, quite frankly, because even here at SU, we're a city within a city. We have our own public safety, we have academic advisors, we have career coaches, career advisors, and Title IX officers. And I mean, there's just been this explosion and growth of positions at the university to meet all of these requirements that students have, but also that are imposed by government entities and all the reporting requirements and so forth. So it's kind of an interesting pickle for administrators to be in when you talk about needing to raise tuition, when the reality is virtually every single year we have to add more positions to the university to keep up with all of the requirements that have come from these outside entities, all the reporting requirements and so forth. It's challenging. It's really challenging to not raise tuition. Now, President Wyatt had a great vision because while I was here, we didn't raise tuition, and for a number of years. And I think it's been the last 4 or 5 years, there's been no tuition increase at SU. Now, that is a challenge when you continue to grow enrollments and you continue to add burden to the folks that are here. And I think that's one of the key dilemmas that administrators will face long into the future. How can you hold costs steady? That means you've got to look at what you're doing that you don't need to do anymore and make some pretty hard decisions about the future of some, whether it's academic programs or administrative functions, in order to meet the new requirements that are coming.
And it's, from a faculty perspective, and granted, I'm just one faculty member, but as you mentioned, that your student with PTSD, and yes, all of us, it becomes very emotional. It becomes my problem too. And looking at, a generation ago or even a decade ago, very much, the faculty was doing the advisement and the instruction and all of that. And now we've got to find there's got to be some help or support for you.
Yeah.
As a faculty member, I need to be very aware of the different programs, approaches, processes, individuals who are there to help and support us. It's a different mindset. It's a different way of taking and looking at things. From your statewide perspective, Marv, I wanted to just touch base with you regarding the issue of globalization and diversity. At SUU, we see increasing globalization, increasing interaction with students from many different countries from around the globe. Is that happening across the state, or what are your observations or perspectives associated with that?
What a wonderful question. I'd say absolutely yes. So now I moved to the Salt Lake Valley with this new position. My office is in Taylorsville at the state office building there. And one of the things when they remodeled that building, they made it kind of a regional government center. So if you need to register your vehicle or get your driver's license, or you're picking up a tax return, or there's a number, half a dozen different government functions on the main floor of that building. So it's fascinating to me every day when I walk in there or head out for lunch. This is really an incredible melting pot. I've seen folks from nationalities all across the world that have made Salt Lake their home and that are coming into this regional center. And it kind of warms my heart that they're coming to receive, you get their driver's license or register a vehicle, all of those basic government services. And higher ed, of course, has been doing this for a lot of years. International students have been a richness to the student experience in colleges and universities all across the country. And it allows us who are Utahns or Americans to have an experience with someone from different culture, different faith, different beliefs, all of those things, and to diversify our thought and our feelings. They're fun to get to know those students. But it also has an interesting impact for colleges and universities, because for many years, those folks have paid out-of-state tuition, which is 3 times what residents are paying. And so there is a financial benefit to the institution for having those international students come. And it's interesting that with COVID, that disrupted that model pretty significantly. China, for example, wouldn't send students to them. I couldn't go back and forth with China. There's I think the largest number of international students at SU, at least when I was here, were students from China. But as those other governments mature the higher ed experience in their own countries, as the United States continues to grapple with what does higher ed look like in the future, and what's the value add for an American education, I worry that there'll be a diminishment. Is that a word?
I'm going to say yes.
We'll have fewer international students coming to America for this American college experience because they'll be educated at home. And I think that has not only financial implications for the institution, but also that cultural campus life experience. And then, of course, there's a whole new dynamic when you talk about online. And when you're not rubbing shoulders with them, when you're not having lunch with them in the student center, those sorts of things, that's a different experience.
It's very two-dimensional, isn't it? Yep, it can be. And we'd hope that we can learn as much from other cultures, the importance of having them here.
Yeah.
Let's kind of wrap up with a question regarding challenges or solutions in the future, things that you see in the future, particular any words of wisdom or opportunities, strategies, or innovations that we may glean from you to look to the future as we try to do what's best for the learners here at Southern Utah University.
Yeah, this is a great question, and one that I'm always a little hesitant to mention with faculty, right? So, but let's go here because from my perspective as the chief financial officer when I was here, online students are infinitely less expensive than providing space for the brick and mortar experience on campus. I think the last building we built on campus was $45 million. the Bristlecone Hall building, beautiful addition to campus, I might add. But we built several new buildings in the time that I was here at SUU. Those often take working with donors to get donated funds, working with the state legislature and the governor's office to get appropriations from the state. And as we continue to grow the number of students that attend, adding brick and mortar becomes incredibly expensive, and there are economic limitations and all those things. Online students, we can serve with a microphone or a Zoom camera and a computer with somebody sitting in their office, and you're an expert at this, so you know this very well. So part of it for me is, how do you find the right balance? We don't want to lose the brick and mortar experience, but at the same time, there's this wonderful opportunity to grow SU's influence and to grow our alumni through the online opportunity. And a lot of folks that want an SUU degree, or that came and left with some credits and not a degree, who want to have that opportunity to finish their degree and get that piece of paper on the wall, if you will. I think that will be an ongoing conversation. One of the beautiful things about SUU, which also became a financial challenge for us, is our model. Because as we build those new buildings, we're building classrooms that for 20 or 30 students, maybe 40. In some cases, we've built new buildings with relatively small classrooms. And so you can't have these massive classes like the big Research One universities have. We've built a couple 100-seat classrooms that are kind of fun, depending on the class and the environment that teachers want to create there. So we've built a campus that focuses on small. We have tenured faculty in the vast majority of those classrooms. We have tenured faculty that are teaching gen ed courses, and that's an expensive model. So there are a number of things we've done to customize the student experience at SUU. That's part of the magic that makes it a wonderful place, but it's a very expensive model. And when you add to that, we're not going to raise tuition at SUU, and I can't say that won't happen forever, but we didn't raise tuition for a number of years. That becomes a huge pressure point for a chief financial officer. And let me just add this one more thing, because I think it's also a dynamic everybody has to focus on. The birth rate in the United States has significantly declined. We have fewer and fewer high school graduates just because we're having fewer and fewer kids, right? So I went to school in Bennington, Vermont, where I grew up, and I have a sister-in-law that was a nurse. She just recently retired at the local high school. Last time I chatted with her, I said, "What's happening with the student enrollment at the high school in Bennington?" And she said, "I've been there for 10 years. Every single year, there's been fewer students than the year before." So back east in particular, the Northeast and the Rust Belt, if you will, there is such a decline in population. Plus, people are moving out of those states, moving to the South and moving to the West. So Utah has been fortunate that our population has continued to grow. We've had new and more students heading to college than most states do. But in the next 5 or 6 years, even Utah's going to hit a plateau and start to face that decline in population. And the competition for students will become pretty intense at that point. It's kind of one of those out on the horizon, but people really need to be thinking about.
We absolutely do. I think in Utah, it's 2025, where for the first time ever, our high school graduates will be fewer than the year previous. Yeah. I know I said last question was the last one, but I got to just throw one more in. Questions that you prepared for that I didn't ask you. Anything that you'd like to share that's on your mind or heart that I wasn't bright enough to ask you?
Well, and I didn't come prepared, but let me ask you this, because the Education College at SU has been our bread and butter for so many, many years, but we've seen a decline. And I feel bad. I think that, unfortunately, politicians have denigrated the career of teaching. What are your thoughts for the future of education? Because we certainly still have kids that need to be educated, need wonderful teachers in the classroom, and I really, really worry. About the future.
I think we do too. We do too. But even with diminished numbers, we are seeing, in part because of COVID or other challenges, a lot of teachers that are retiring. And so there right now, in the state of Utah, elementary schools, quite frankly, are the ones that really are underserved. And there is a shortage of qualified, licensed elementary teachers. And that's really our bread and butter. Yes, we do serve secondary programs throughout the state and throughout the departments here at SUU, but our elementary program is really where we're at. And in part due to the President Wyatt's vision of let's look to what we can develop online. We've had an elementary education online program for about the last 4 or 5 years. We have over 150 students across the state. We've limited it right now to in-state because it's just too complex to try to get people out of state licensed. We'd love to, like you said, we'd love to come back to Utah. But we've got 150 teachers, anywhere from the first class, English 1010, to student teaching along that path, who are excited to be teachers, and they're having those the form or the content is online. We do use Zoom, just as you identified, but they do their practical experiences through their coursework and through their student teaching and block experiences, just as if they came here face to face. We have a student teacher in Tremonton, he or she does his work at Tremonton Middle School or high school or elementary school. And so it really does provide a service back to those individual communities statewide. And so I do feel that we are serving statewide and doing what we can and being available as schools and districts and teachers need us. They're there. Does that kind of help?
It absolutely does. And I would want to say thanks to all the teachers out there. I cannot help but think back to elementary school, as you mentioned, and remember Mr. Nolan, who was my favorite elementary school teacher, maybe because he was a man. I don't know. He was just goofy and funny, and everybody looked forward to having Mr. Nolan.
Guilty as charged.
Yeah,
Guilty as
sixth
charged.
grade, right? But that whole elementary school experience is the foundation of a lifetime of learning, but also a lifetime of work and service and so forth. So I plead with folks who are going into that profession to be patient, loving, kind, to be that favorite teacher for students, because it really made a difference in my life. And inevitably, there's an elementary school out there making a difference in every student's life and hopefully lighting that flame of education. Anyway, it's a great career.
Marv, welcome back to SUU.
Well,
there's always a home here for you sometime. And so please don't ever hesitate to stop in and just say hi. You're a valued part of our past and present, and we just appreciate you so very much. Thank you for being here today.
Well, thank you for the invitation. Yep. Thank you so much.